We wrap every episode, the final episode of every single week, with your hottest takes. And that's why we're asking you for these emails, because this has become our favorite tradition, our favorite 5 minutes. That's right. This is the Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. These are all real emails or YouTube comments submitted via the Real Talk YouTube channel. How about this one from Cam in a Pizzeria, who says, "Hey Jespo, as a small business owner, following your conversation November 13th with Naheed Nenshi on minimum wage, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts." He says, "I'm not firmly for or against increases to minimum wage. Every business operates differently, and a single policy doesn't affect every single business in the same way." Says, "But in our shop, our payroll has a target of like 20% of revenue. So when wages increase, something else has to adjust, which is typically our prices, our staffing levels, or the hours that were available for service. It's most important to recognize that minimum wage and the actual cost of an employee are not the same. For example, a $15 an hour wage translates into approximately $18 an hour once you paid CPP and EI and WCB and vacation pay and all those additional employer costs. So in my mind, we are already," says Cam, "at an $18 an hour minimum wage. These additional costs are always overlooked by people, and they are very real." Cam says, "An increase would also bring my employees down to minimum wage on paper, and that creates another challenge. So now I'm expected to raise everyone's pay by an additional $3 an hour to maintain their existing wage gap," right? So his employees making 18 right now. He says, so now then minimum wage goes to 18. Now they got to go to 21. He says, I guess, okay, let's do it. But small business, that compounds the impact significantly. If the minimum wage is raised to $18 an hour, I can adapt, says Cam, but there will be consequences. Most likely higher prices, reduced hours available to staff, because for me, payroll needs to stay near that 20% target. Cam says, "I'm not arguing against increasing it. I'm just saying the conversation needs more nuance, especially around the unforeseen circumstances that don't show up in the headline numbers, but have very real effect on how small businesses operate." That's Cam in a Pizzeria. Thanks very much, Cam. What about this one from Coreen, who says, "Jespo, on November 12th, your interview with Mr. Brian Lilley, and he talked about how, in his opinion, kids should be in school. On September 30th, Truth and Reconciliation Day. On November 11th, on Remembrance Day, so they can learn about these parts of our history. Does he, or unfortunately too many education ministers, not realize that for weeks ahead of those days, teachers are teaching and sharing about this history and building connections? Like, to have those days then as stat holidays allows for families to recognize and honor the people and their history in their own way. Or if they choose not to, that's their choice as well. Once again, including educators in these types of discussions and decisions might actually help make informed decisions." Coreen wants more respect for teachers in the process. What about this one from Robert, who says, "Jespo, your November 12th interview with Brian Lilley, something that set me off, had me swearing, Jespo. It was when the conversation turned to the floor crossing and Andrew Scheer going on a man-baby rampage. Low expectations for mediocre idiots," says Robert. Says Scheer was an early adopter of the convoy. He sent a pack of online goons to attack Rachel Gilmore. He got physical, allegedly, with a staffer, and he had a hissy fit at a floor crosser, Chris D'Entremont, and Lilley just laughed it off. He really showed his rebel media roots. Political violence isn't something that we chuckle about as though Andy's just some howdy-doody looking simpleton. It's a joke. Stop letting this stuff slide. From Robert. What about this one from Jason, who says, "Jespo, Matt Jeneroux's resignation, his retirement as a member of parliament. My thoughts on the timing," says Jason, "may have something to do with the confidence vote that Pierre Poilievre will face in January. You have an MP step down when there might be a leadership race triggered, creating a by-election riding that's somewhat safe for a new leader here in Edmonton. It kind of seems like maybe it sort of works. Pure speculation, though." That from Jason. Jason, I'm not sure that riding is as safe for the Conservatives as you might think. What about this one from Chris, who says, "Jespo, November 4th, your Doug Ford, I would never apologize to Donald Trump episode. I fell out of my chair when you said people have been telling us your biggest investment or your biggest storage of wealth should be in your home or real estate." Chris says, "Don't listen to those people. Depending on your situation, that could be the worst advice anybody could give you." That's not real talk, Ryan. That's crazy talk. Home ownership, says Chris, is a money pit. Even as dinks, dual income, no kids. Once upon a time, we had to argue with the home builder to spend less than what our bank had pre-approved. We knew that affordability didn't end with your mortgage payment. We knew that there'd be insurance and repairs and property taxes and utilities and cable and internet, and it would all eat into our disposable income, and we'd be able to max out and diversify other savings, TFSA, RRSP, RESP. Check out northroadic.com. Was more important than home ownership, says Chris. I wish I would have found Garth Turner's The Greatest Fool blog earlier. He says he's a great read. Home ownership, despite what we've been led to believe, is not for everyone. Renting is frequently more affordable, but emotions cloud judgment. That from Chris. And how about this one from Laura, who says, Jespo, I'll try to be brief. Labor rights are human rights, and the right to strike is part of our Charter of Rights and Freedoms and our right to assembly. I'll also remind Real Talkers that the government writes the law, but the government does not author morality. In the early part of the 20th century, it was illegal for women to vote, says Laura. There were women-led demonstrations and protests until rights were codified. In 1951, or up until 1951, it was illegal for Indigenous people to vote. And if an Indigenous person married a non-Indigenous person, the government revoked their status under the Indian Act. Indigenous folks have and continue to protest discriminatory laws and have made notable gains, albeit reluctant at the government level, with the TRC process. She says until 2005, it was illegal for 2S LGBTQI plus people to marry. It took decades of demonstrations and protests to gain that right, until there was overwhelming outcry. The Alberta government contemplated under Ralph Klein using the notwithstanding clause to exclude queer people in Alberta from their rights. These short examples, says Laura, prove that the government writes the laws, but the people can and should defy the law if it's wrong. Governments are made up by people, and those people make wrong decisions from time to time, and it's up to you, Real Talkers, as citizens, to decide if you're willing to stand up for civil rights and stand up for yourself. She says, I know that civil rights leaders often wear with pride the disproportional punishment of government. And I'll tell you, Ryan, that if my union goes on strike and is ordered back to work, I will be on that strike line anyway, right at the front, to protect my members and to take the consequences if necessary. She says, I'm saving up a fund for bail for that eventuality because it's the right thing to do. That from Laura, who's all fired up for this episode of The Flamethrower, which is proudly presented by the DQs in Palisades, Namao, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road. When you pop in for a signature stack burger, I recommend The Flamethrower. You let them know that Real Talk sent you. We'll be back at it Monday with Federal Minister Eleanor Olszewski and our regular Supriya Dwivedi, all presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Have an incredible weekend, friends. Maybe I'll see you out tonight at the Taste of Home Gala in support of the Ronald McDonald House Foundation, doing amazing work. And if not, then we'll catch you Monday morning.